Listen, all I can say is that it's very ridiculous to me to try and blame people who are just trying to survive. People are the product of their environments. You understand that, right? If you're born with a home, you don't need to steal to get food. If you live on the street because you can't get work, because you are sick, there's a number of reasons that you could be there. You might need to steal to stay alive. Truly, we're not going to impugn someone for staying alive when you have a biological imperative to survive. And this same mentality goes into all forms of like property crime and whatever. If you want to solve that problem, you have to address the problem at its root. Why are so many people forced into homelessness? And when you look into why so many people are forced into homelessness, you'll realize it's a product of the society that we have built and that we inherited. But we can choose to build that society in a different direction. And we need to choose to build that society in a different direction. We can't just wave our hands and say, oh, it's not my problem. It will become your problem. I mean, does that matter? Does it matter if they started here or if they ended up here? It's not like, do you think that they're just vacationers, my dude? Wait, Peacecraft, do you think that they're just vacationers? Actually, you know what? Let's do this. Let's talk. Why don't you do you want to pop into my voice chat and we'll do a little debate? I know you like Destiny. I know you like to do debates. Here's your opportunity. Do you want to debate me? All right, cool. Join the Discord and I'll pull you in. Join the Discord and then go into the green room and then I'll pull you in. We'll have a talk about this. Because I feel like we could make a little bit more progress on this if we just talk one-to-one. Let's see. Okay, Peacecraft is in. All right. Join the waiting room. Hey, hold on one second.
Hello.
One second. Hey. All right, what's up? All right, so we're talking about fucking homelessness, right? Yeah, you might have to mute the stream. Let me just put a little notification up here so people know who I'm talking to. Talking to xPeacecraftx. All right, there we go. Let me just make that up there. All right, sick. So let's talk. Let's talk about this. All right, so you believe that homeless people should be like ground up into Soylent or something like that?
No, but I absolutely have empathy with Washingtonians that live in Seattle that have had to deal with the ineffective response from our various NGOs and the city council. Well, the material conditions have degraded. And I feel a good amount of empathy for those individuals who, through no fault of their own, are forced into material conflict with that situation day in and day out, currently for about the past 5 to 10 years.
True, but why would your focus of that be to turn on to the homeless people themselves? The people who literally
as the data that we've collected so far from is that a majority of our homeless are from out of state. For instance, the latest news issue, the latest killing was from Travis Burgess, I believe, which was featured in that Seattle is Dying documentary, who had an arrest record of over 130 miscellaneous crimes and felonies, was a notorious meth addict, had this dude definitely had a rap sheet about as thick as a phone book until, unfortunately, this past weekend, shot himself and his girlfriend in Cal Anderson Park.
That's terrible.
I would make the argument that a majority of the blame falls with our AG and city prosecutor, Dan Satterberg, and we are not holding bad actors to account. So when the populace decides to get angry at their elected official not holding bad actors to account, I do not find them morally blamed. Or I don't find them to blame morally.
Okay, so, well, let me get this. Let's just be clear about this. So somebody who clearly has, like, I mean, according to your, I mean, again, I'm not familiar with this particular case, but somebody who has a long criminal history, found their way here to Seattle, and do you believe that it's the blame of an individual, that there was like of that individual specifically, like that it's their homelessness that would cause the sort of problems, wouldn't you sort of like point to something like there's more of a story than just like this is just some bad person who came in and is a distinctly evil person, right? I mean, do you believe in like evil people, for example?
A good portion of our homeless, at least a good portion of our homeless that exist on economic conditions, are what we'd probably define as ghost homeless.
Okay.
These are the individuals that live in a car or live on their friend's bed. And the
Sure.
data on them generally shows that within like 1 to 3 months, those people, they might cycle out of homelessness, but they're at least getting back onto that lower rung of income generation and like stable housing, right? Like they cycle down to that point, but then they get back on the treadmill, as it were, pretty good. The homeless that we see around 3rd and Pike, 3rd and Pine, a good portion of those is probably generally heroin. Like that's a good portion of it is drugs and the mentally ill.
So do you think that like drug addiction, I mean, you sound like you're pretty devoted to data here. So you realize that drug addiction is a medical condition, right? Especially
No, I absolutely excoriate the doctors that overprescribed for the opiate epidemic.
So
But it's not a one thing is bad so that we have to deal with it. Like both things can be bad, and it is okay if a different group of people is angry at that thing. So if the taxpayers of Seattle witness the material conditions of which, I mean, we could dig into Seattle politics for the millions of close to billions that have been spent on that scenario with zero positive outcome. Like it's been zero. We've spent billions.
Well,
So if the populace of
that's
Washington,
very vague, though. Like, I mean, I don't know exactly what you're talking about with that. Like, when you say billions have been spent on that situation, I mean, I will agree that
between Share, Holla, Wheel, the other organizations that Seattle has to spend on the homeless, we have spent billions on that group, and we've had very little purchase back with that community. So if Seattleites or the people of Greater King County want to be upset, it is okay that they are upset.
Well, I mean, I never would argue that it's okay to be upset. I would just argue with the target of that upsetness. I've seen an incredible amount, even in this chat alone, of people who genuinely seem to hate the homeless people. They seem to think that the homeless people are somehow like morally bad for being homeless or for struggling with addiction, something that we all can admit is a medical condition.
Well, that depends on your philosophical framework. Like I wouldn't excoriate a mentally ill individual that finds themselves homeless. We'd have to blame St. Ronnie for shutting down the mental hospitals, right? For those,
I mean, that's going to do a big thing. I mean,
but as far as drug addiction goes, it depends on your philosophical framework.
I mean,
yes,
sure.
People do have agency. Yes, addiction is a thing, but that does not mean that gives you carte blanche to be like, oh, the junkie broke my window again. I'm going to go down and make them peanut butter sandwiches because they're one good day away from not doing it. No, people are sick of it because the money that they have spent in taxation towards the problem has borne no fruit.
Okay, so there's a couple of ways.
So it reaches a point where you do come to hate them and you're like, I don't want to even fucking deal with these people anymore. Like that is the level of vitriol that you are going to see in King County and see in Washington as a whole.
There it kind of comes out though, isn't it? Like, isn't that like again, when you have so you have a very, very clear line of class strata here, of people who literally don't have a place to live and people who do have a place to live who are bothered by the existence or whatever, or actions of individual homeless people or whatever. And I guess you could say, yeah, it depends on your moral framework, but I mean, you could say that about anything, right? Because I mean, a fascist could justify saying we should just kill all the homeless, and that's obviously absurd. I would assume that we can both agree that homelessness isn't a matter. It's not a matter of fault. Like people.
No, but this is a perspective issue between us, between people who have lived here our entire lives, our parents who have lived here, our grandparents, everyone else. We have seen this change occur. Versus an individual who might have only lived here for a couple of years.
Wait.
It has been our home.
Wait. But now you're just appealing to the fact that you have lived in Seattle for longer than somebody else as to why you're justified in hating the homeless. Like that's
Yes,
not.
if you
Wait,
see
that's
the
not. But
material
that's not.
conditions of the place that you've lived the most
Wait.
degrade, you're
You
allowed to be upset.
wait. You keep saying the material conditions as if that's some way to justify hating the homeless. It's not. If you've seen a degradation in the material circumstances, you have to ask why that is, instead of just, I mean, I would assume, of course, if you want to just hate whatever the first thing you see is, sure, go ahead. You'll end up going down the path of the fucking fascists, where you're just like, oh yeah, I hate anybody. It's those immigrants' fault. You know, people come up with angry reasons, things to blame, scapegoats to blame all the time. But if you want to actually understand what it is, I mean, have you been paying attention to the economy in the last few decades? You know that we've had like two historic crashes.
100%. And Washington State was largely unaffected by the last one. We're generally propped up by a few large companies that, we had a recession.
Are you being honest right now? Like,
yes, I'm being 100% honest. If we look at all the data in comparison to other states, the Pacific Northwest in the last economic crash, we went down. We had a bad day, but it was not as bad by comparison to a bunch of other states.
When you say you had a bad day, what are your metrics for that? You know that like homelessness all around the United States has raised up, and that has led to people having to move from place to place to place. People like members of like my own generation, like, I mean, fuck, I've moved like fucking goddamn, I don't even know, like 7 times in the last, not even that, let me see, probably close to 10 times, 11 times in the last decade. Like, people move all over the place. Like, people have to migrate all over the place. The homelessness has gone up all over the place. You can't just say that, like, oh, well, what metric are you using to say that we had the two massive historical economic crashes that have occurred in this country have not affected Seattle? Just because some people in Seattle weren't affected doesn't mean that other people weren't, or that
no, like Washington as a whole, like our rates of homelessness during the last economic crisis, the rates of job loss during the last economic crisis, the rates of median wage decrease during the last economic crisis, the Pacific Northwest did better. Or yes, everybody suffered. Washington, Oregon did not suffer as much as other states.
But doing better doesn't really mean all that much when you're talking about two back-to-back historical economic crashes. Like, doing better is fine. I mean, we did better on coronavirus, but we still had a ton of people die, and we're still living in fucking quarantine. Like, when you're saying, oh, doing better, that is a comparative statement. It's relative. So
the only things that we have to compare to are how the other states in the United States have done, right? If we're going to compare how our government has handled things or how our local economy has handled things, if we're all facing the same issue,
no, that's completely
different.
independent as to whether you should target the fucking homeless for that. That has absolutely nothing to do with it. You're just comparing individual states' responses to an overwhelmingly crushing economic crisis that has led to, like, I mean, fuck, millennials have like no household wealth as a class, and that applies all across the United States.
I don't think you can make that sweeping generalization.
Wait, that's fact. That is literally income stats. You could pull that from the Bureau of Labor Statistics if you want to. Millennials have fucking no wealth. Are you kidding me? That's like overwhelming fact. So it's not just like, oh, the homeless in Seattle are like this bad culture of bad homeless people that moved in. Our entire country is experiencing a massive collapse. It's like people like our economic collapse is hard to fathom. We haven't seen anything like this since the 1900s, since the early 1900s, the Great Depression. Do you know what happened in the Great Depression? That there was a mass migration of people, hungry people who needed work, and they came to the West Coast, sometimes found that there was no work, and maybe died in the streets here. And you're going to be like, I really wish this homeless person didn't die there. That's so inconvenient.
No, but we have absolutely negative externalities with the current population
you come off as a fool.
In cases of violent crime, in cases of rape, in cases of murder, in cases of theft, and other externalities that the populace has to deal with. Why are you shifting the burden that they have to deal with those things?
Wait, who has to deal with those things?
You are taking my argument as an excoriation of the homeless population.
I mean, it is. You've stated that multiple times.
I'm saying that I am empathetic to the people who live here that did not have to deal with a thing, and now they have to deal with a thing.
Well, what about the homeless who didn't have to deal with being homeless before, and now they have to deal with being homeless? Oops.
Yeah,
oops.
Like I said,
that wasn't in your calculation, wasn't it?
No, I absolutely grant. Now I'm losing my speech. I grant for individuals that are mentally ill, they should receive a level of medical help. For individuals that are undergoing addiction, they should receive medical help. For the individuals that you have described that move to Washington State and then say rent is expensive.
Wait, why does it matter?
I do have a more difficult.
Well, why would that matter at all? Why would it matter at all if they're from here or not? Like humans, like you have this sort of like native, like it's like this weird like essentialism that like, oh, you've been here for a while. Well, like who cares? People move places for all kinds of reasons. People move it's literally a well-documented phenomenon that people move all the time to work.
I'm absolutely well aware of that. Absolutely well aware. I'm saying if you exercise agency and you choose to move to a place and then you say this place is expensive, who caused you to come into that conflict?
Wait, what happens if your town, like, let's talk about something like this. Here, let me give you a very real example of something that's happening right now. Let's say that, I don't know, a huge portion of your state burned down, maybe your entire state burned down, and you don't have anything left anymore because the wildfires that have been burning a massive percentage of both the other two states on the West Coast have literally burned your town down. Let's just say that's an example. That's something we're going to be dealing with in the coming months as winter comes on and people's homes have been burnt down. So let's say that's the case, and you came to Seattle because it's a big city and there's might be food here. There might be a place for you to stay. There might be a homeless shelter. What happens then? Are you like, oh, well, you shouldn't have come here. You shouldn't have come here and complain about the rent.
No, I don't think that's a necessarily apt comparison. We're not comparing an act of God, as it would be described, to an individual exercising agency to move.
Is absolutely, for most people in this country, the economy is an act of God. Somebody who
that is a gross generalization.
That is not true at all. Are you kidding me? Are you telling me? Do you know how bad income inequality and wealth inequality is in the United States? And you're going to tell me that some random person who's just born and just happens to be born in like some random rural town that doesn't have any jobs, and they're like, okay, I'm starving. I either need to go to the city or I just need to lay down and die. And they choose to go to the city, and then they're like, wow, I came to the city and I'm working, but the rent is so high here that I literally can't live, and so I'm living out of a box while working my job or whatever, and then their mental health declines, and then they're just homeless. And you're going to be like, you should have just bootstrapped harder.
No, I'm cogent on this argument. If I chose to up and move to Rodeo Drive tomorrow and couldn't afford the rent, I would not blame Rodeo Drive.
Wait, what if you couldn't afford the rent in the place that you came from?
Whenever leftists tend to make this argument, they paint rural areas.
Listen. Hold on a second. I know you're a fan of Destiny, but get the fuck out of here with this whenever leftist shit. You're talking to Demon Mama, so talk to me and don't talk to fucking other random leftists.
I have heard this argument before that these
I know. I'm sure you have.
Economically impoverished in that there is zero jobs.
Wait a minute.
That's not the case.
Wait. You don't know that for shit. You're fifth
100%.
Wait a second. Wait, hold on a second. You're fifth generation in this fucking state. You said it yourself. You don't know shit about rural America. I grew up in rural America. Do you know how?
Would you not define Eastern Washington as rural America?
Oh, absolutely. And I would be willing to bet that there's places in rural Washington that are fucked economically, completely fucked, where you have a choice between living with 11 other people in a house that's owned by your friend's grandma and working at Walmart for the rest of your life, or take a gamble and go to the city. And sometimes that gamble doesn't pay out because, as it turns out, our economic system is in fucking shambles. And we have people like fucking Jeff Bezos with $100 bazillion sitting on it, and other people who have fucking nothing at all. So yeah, I don't buy that the economy for most people isn't an act of God, that they could just be completely chucked around. They might wake up tomorrow and find out, sorry, your job doesn't exist. Like, oh God, what's the unemployment rate at right now? Do you think all of those people deserved their unemployment? Do you know how many people are unemployed in the United States right now? Do you know how much of a ghoul you come off pretending like the economy, like coronavirus didn't strike and just fuck everyone's lives because the federal government said, nah, fuck you, you guys can deal with it on your own?
No, I'm fully well aware that the unemployment numbers are largely fudged with and does not account for individuals that have stopped seeking work. I understand that I am part of a class that benefited from work from home, while an individual who is a basic server or a basic stalker probably did not get to benefit from that.
And what about all the people who just straight up lost their jobs? Are you aware of how many fucking businesses have shuttered?
But talking about Washington State, which you just brought up, and if you look at tax income equality, the worst county in Washington State for tax income is the Native American Reservation on southeastern Washington,
Okay.
with a negative 15-cent parity on the dollar to taxation.
Yeah. Okay.
Other than that, throughout rural Washington and even up into including most of northern and central Idaho and down into eastern Oregon,
Okay.
there is plenty of work. It is different stylings of work than what you would find in a city.
Imagine saying there's plenty of work in the middle of coronavirus when people
100% plenty. The lumber mills were operating this weekend while I was out there deer hunting.
Oh,
like
let me ask you something. Do you have to have any sort of specialized knowledge to work at a lumber mill?
100% no.
Guess what?
They're hiring right now.
Straight lying.
No, I'm not.
You want to know how? I fucking grew up in rural Maine, my dude. I was surrounded by lumber mills. You absolutely have to have fucking specialized knowledge to work at those. You can't just fucking
laborer?
You can't just stumble in and work in a fucking union environment. Are you kidding me? Lumber mills half of them are unionized. You're not going to just stumble in and just get a job at a fucking lumber mill. Do you know how dangerous of a job that is? You have to have fucking safety training. Are you kidding me? It's really funny. I love this. This is one of the things I fucking love. I love it when people come in and they're like, yeah, I own a house. I'm a 5th generation person here. I work at Google. And then they're like, why don't you just get a job, 5-head? You've literally never even had to face that struggle in your life. And you're going to come in here and be like, wow.
Whoa. Are we playing the generalization game? Because you have no idea in Washington, where I grew up, my economic background, my parental background, my educational background. You have zero fucking knowledge of those things.
Yeah, and guess what? And guess what? I don't give a shit, because in the same way that you don't give a shit about any of the fucking homeless, that you're like, oh, why should they stop bleeding on my shoe? And that's what you came into this conversation with. And then
you
also,
have misrepresented my point.
Hold on a second.
3 fucking times.
Hold on a second.
Never excoriated. Even Mananan in the chat says, the Seattleites are upset at the way that the government has handled the expenditure of that money, but I understand and am empathetic to them. If they deal with that crime that does affect them in violent ways and they are upset, I understand.
Except guess what? Except the problem is that when you came in here, I specifically asked you, why would you then target the homeless? And you went on to justify the argument that you have made has been justifying the excoriation of the homeless in this state. You have not, you've stated, oh, well, I wouldn't necessarily do that. And then you proceeded to immediately do that. And that's why I say, if you're going to have the same callousness towards the fucking homeless in this state, why should I ever give the benefit of the doubt to you by your own standards to give a shit about whatever your made up background might be? If you can't even give the slightest drop to somebody who doesn't even have a home. Why would I care when you clearly stated that you're in a significantly better position than them? That's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous ask.
Seattleites are upset because they have spent billions through share,
and guess what? Do you want to know who else is? Do you want to know who else is upset? Do you want to know who else is upset? Trump supporters. They fucking hate Mexicans. Does that mean that they're right? No, they're fucking wrong.
That's a massive pivot. But
no,
if you'd like to talk about immigration,
if we're going to talk about because you're saying that just because people are upset that makes it okay to come to certain conclusions. Absolutely not. When you look at the homelessness crisis in America, and which goes hand in hand with a number of other mass struggles that our society is dealing with right now, including, mind you, and you brought this up, the opioid crisis, which is literally made deaths of despair skyrocket. It's disgusting. It's sickening that so many people die from that. And then you're going to come into this conversation and pretend that you're downplaying of the homeless's needs in favor of people who are frustrated about certain things, which I understand. Like I said, my fucking car literally got smashed up by kids, but you don't see me fucking going off about kids or implying that the kids are part of the problem. They're just fucking kids. My car got wrecked. Shit happens.
But if you were upset at those kids, I wouldn't blame you for it or call you bigoted.
If I was upset at those kids and I was upset at those kids and I was advocating for policies that would directly harm the material condition of those children, then I would absolutely take the exact same problem with myself in that situation that I'm taking with you right now.
If you got upset with the kids for smashing your car?
No, if I got up, it's upset at the kids, and then I said, actually, you know what? I'm going to vote to make it illegal for children to play outside. Then that would be me taking out my frustration on the children, even though they're children. and they are the product of their circumstance. And realistically, if I wanted to solve that problem, there's probably 100 things I could do. Like, maybe, let's see, maybe I would support candidates that support like local amenities, so that children have things to do in the day instead of throwing rocks at cars. That would be the smart, the big brain, the non-reactionary, non-Trump supporter who hates Mexicans type take that I would come to. If I was mad at children, I would say, wait a minute, I wonder what caused the children to be playing with rocks instead of having other things to do. Oh, well, maybe it's because they have nowhere else to go, so they stand around in their neighborhood and throw rocks here. Maybe the homeless have nowhere else to go by definition because they're homeless. And so maybe we should say, Jesus Christ, maybe we're getting swindled by these NGOs. Maybe we should look at more direct solutions like giving the homeless houses.
Where are you going to build those houses?
What do you mean, where are you going to build those houses? Do you not think that there's land that can be acquired?
A waterlocked isthmus on 3 sides connected by 3 bridges.
Wait, do you think that there's no land around Seattle? Do you think that there's no properties that could be purchased by the government? Do you not think that the government could use their power to say, hey, we're going to start a massive public housing works project, and we're going to send a bus lane that goes right here. All of a sudden, you have homeless people in homes, and you have them going in buses. Guess what? Your problem is solved. You don't got blood on your shoe anymore, buddy.
The last one that was started was in Magnolia at the former National Guard building, and it collapsed.
Oh, damn. Maybe they should do better then.
Maybe
the government should do a better job. Imagine that.
The statement of the government should do a better job.
Yes,
when
they should.
Government
Absolutely
has been given billions.
Wait a second.
Share, wheel, and holla, it has not worked.
Wait, that is a critique of the government. And if you really want to get into it, and I'm sure you'll hate this because I know Destiny hates talking about this stuff too, but maybe not. Maybe you'll like to talk about this. But we can talk about how the privatization of government through these organizations, these NGO organizations, instead of the government directly doing things, which is this literally, it's like this neoliberal approach to everything, where it's like, we're not just going to actually do the thing or set up a government organization to do the thing. We're going to hire a private firm to do it that's going to be paying all of their people. It's going to be subject to the same exact problems that a corporation does. Instead of us just doing it directly, we have to maintain this. It's as Zizek would like to say, pure ideology. It's pure ideology. The fact that we constantly defer to private organizations to do the work that the government should be doing, that we are giving money to the government to do, that's a problem with our system. Not with the homeless. That's not even a problem, and I would argue it is a problem with our politicians, because most of our politicians here in Seattle are neoliberals, like it or not. They are, definitively. They're free market, socially, like vaguely socially left people. But they're neoliberals. They believe in these sort of market solutions where instead of the government just saying, wait a minute, why don't we take this tax money and actually build the project we're supposed to do? No, they issue the contract to some private company who finds a way to make all the money disappear, mostly into the pockets of the people who are at the top of that organization, which happens again and again and again. We see the same. This fucking shit is the entire story of the West Coast, my dude. The entire story of the West Coast. You look at fucking the way that California handles power, and you have the same exact story to the same shit we're seeing here in Seattle. It's because...
So, if Seattleites are being taxed, and that money is going to NGOs, and those NGOs are not delivering on metrics to improve the scenario, why would you expect Seattleites to A, be happy, or B, want to give more money in taxation to solve that problem?
Wait a minute.
I wouldn't understand them being upset.
Oh, no, I absolutely understand them being upset. 100%. I just don't understand them being upset and then using that to justify demonizing and downplaying the plight of the homeless. Sorry, but that's the argument that
they are still.
But that's the argument that you came in here with, and that is a tiny brain argument.
By those homeless.
Wait.
They are victimized. They suffer.
Okay.
They suffer.
Come on.
Assault,
all right.
rape,
Don't.
Theft.
Come on. All right, my dude.
That's true. That exists.
Please spare me the attempt to overplay when we're talking about homeless people who don't fucking have a home. Both people can, like you said before, both parties can be, just using your own argument against you, both parties here can have bad things happening to them, and it doesn't have to be taken out on either one of those parties. It is clearly the government that has failed here, not the homeless people. Homeless people have, like, we know how bad homelessness is in America. I hope that we don't have to argue over that. Although maybe we have to. Maybe you and I would have to have a discussion over how bad homelessness is in America. We know how sticky the income levels are in America. People cycle in and out. There's this widely documented phenomenon in sociology called the cycle of poverty. It's really hard to get out of here in America. Really, really hard. So we know all these things. So why the fuck would you downplay the plight of people who are way worse off, who aren't even, did you know that homeless people are not only way more likely to suffer from severe mental illness, both induced by their experiences with homelessness and because people with mental struggles in this country are stigmatized to an unbelievable degree, but also that they're way more likely to themselves be the victim of crimes? So yes, it is it's terrible. I as I said firsthand, I've had my own fucking car, which is a privilege I have, thankfully, damaged by something that made me mad. And yeah, I'm like, fucking kids, god damn it, but I'm never gonna go and fucking support government actions or jump into rhetoric that demonizes children. The same way you shouldn't do so for the homeless.
It seems like your rhetoric is granting them a measure of a pass on their actions. If our axioms are grounded, we would say that theft is wrong regardless if a man is rich or poor. Murder is wrong regardless if a man is rich or poor. Assault and battery are wrong regardless if a man is rich or poor.
Grounding the axioms. What a meme.
So if an individual is victimized, they are allowed to be upset at the group that causes that.
Yeah, the axiom's grounded. I mean, I don't know about you, but if somebody steals a piece of bread because they're starving, I go, why the fuck is that person starving? I'm not going to be like, oh, you have committed in the book of the 10 Commandments says thou shalt not steal. Because see, I don't believe in that sort of essentializing of morals. I don't believe that we should look at, and keep in mind, we're not talking about individuals here. We are talking about a collective specifically. You yourself are also doing this, that homeless people are a class of people. There are many reasons why they become homeless, but no individual, you can't pivot to some sort of individualized argument about, well, unless we're talking about a specific homeless person. If you have a specific homeless person, you want to like spend a time like dicing down the moral decisions that they make, sure, okay, whatever. I'm not interested in having that discussion. But this entire conversation has been talking about the homeless as a class of people. And when you're talking about the homeless as a class of people, it makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense to direct ire towards the homeless people. It makes no sense when they
so you believe they should not be held to account in any form or fashion.
I never said that, but I literally never even said anything close to that. I said that.
And that is a misunderstanding of me by your rhetoric. It seems like you're granting them a shit ton of rope on almost to the extreme of you can't hold them accountable.
Okay, let me ask you something. So do you think that humans have an urge to survive, right?
Yes.
You would agree with that, right? So we have an urge to survive. I would argue that our urge to survive can often even push us to things that would otherwise be seen irrational, as irrational. Do you know what the base human needs are?
Are we talking Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Yeah, but I mean the basics. You know, the meme, the 3 needs that everybody needs.
Fire, water, shelter.
Food, water, and shelter. But yeah. Do you notice that somebody who doesn't have shelter does not have one of their basic physical needs being met? And that would put them in a position where they are constantly fighting for survival. And
yes,
I do not
agreed,
think that it is rational in any way to go, yes, well, if we just conveniently erase the context that they don't have their basic needs, and there's no way for them to fulfill these basic needs, or they can't find a way to fulfill those basic needs because it's been made very difficult to do so for one reason or another, then we can say, wait a second, maybe we should take a step back. Instead of getting mad at the homeless people, we should look at the circumstances that make it so fucking hard for homeless people.
But we can excoriate that group or that individual if they act suboptimally in that position.
Wait a minute. If
your tire is flat and then you go around and flatten all your other tires. You're talking about a
basic need, my dude. It is literally the most basic understanding of human needs. You cannot act optimally when you do not have food, water, and shelter. You have been put into a position of having to live like an animal.
You can't get self-actualization until you get up that pyramid.
No, you can't survive. You can barely survive. You can live this shamble of a life where you're trying every single day. Your entire life is going to be determined around trying to get food, trying to find somewhere you won't freeze to death. Do you know how many fucking homeless people die on the street every year, especially in winter? This is your
fatalism, my dude. This is fatalism, is what it is.
This isn't fatalism. This is rationality. This is the thing that drives me nuts. And it's this complete denial. It's like you're willing to grant all of this empathy for people who might have something happen to their property. But then when it comes to, then all of a sudden we start talking about poor people who don't even have food, water, and shelter. And you're like, well, they need to start behaving and do this, the mental calculus. They need to do their utilitarian calculus and ground their axioms before they decide to eat a piece of food, when every single biological force that we understand drives them to find a place to sleep, to find a place to eat, to find something to drink by any means necessary. And all of this is in service of because you refuse to recognize that there are systemic problems that put the homeless in the category that they are. That doesn't mean that every action a homeless person takes is somehow free of moral calculus, but it means that the moral calculus can barely be on the table because they're having to survive. Like, I mean, I don't see you sitting out here fucking extolling like a raccoon for eating out of the trash. If you
wouldn't compare to a human to an animal, first of all.
Well, hold on a second. But that's the funny thing. Humans are animals. And if humans are not able to thrive at all and they are forced to live like animals, then they will behave like animals. Absolutely. Are you fucking kidding me? Do you think that like you can just sort of like cross your legs and just transcend the need for hunger and shelter? Have you ever slept like outside in the middle of winter by yourself? On the street?
I've been homeless at some point.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm disinclined to believe you, but I will say, but that's fine. I'll grant that you maybe have. But I would say maybe you should have a little bit more charity towards people who do not even have their most basic physical needs than people who have all their basic physical needs, but as a result of the socioeconomic situation that much of the United States find themselves in, are suffering at like literally by the friction of people living together, and people who have been forced into conditions for a number of reasons that maybe have severe mental conditions.
The administrator's probably correct. I probably have some level of survivorship bias.
You definitely do. Absolutely. That's undeniable.
The issue with your argument is that you allow the critique of the system to allow poor behavior when there's an equal amount of valid optimal behavior that no one would have a fucking problem with.
You don't know that, though. You assert that, but you don't know that. You actually don't know that. You assert that. But here's the thing, and this is a thing I've actually encountered a lot of times in debates similar to this, which is that you are talking about a collective and you're attempting to use individual justification for a collective, but we're not talking about we're not talking about individuals. You don't know what any homeless person's individual situation is. You aren't in their shoes. You don't know if they haven't exhausted every other option. You can't possibly know that. You're asserting that because it fits your ideology, the ideology that tells you that I should be able to morally impugn people who have nothing.
Answer chat really quick. The reason I like the words optimal and suboptimal is because the words good and bad or poor or whatever have really loaded language with them.
Yeah, but you're just subbing them for they mean the exact same thing.
No,
they absolutely don't weasel on this. Destiny does the same thing too, and where he weasels on suboptimal and not optimal don't mean bad or good. It's just you're just hiding, you're just masking your language.
No, I think that's a fair distinction.
It's absolutely still loaded. Absolutely. I'm sorry. I'm gonna go to bat for my own fucking chat here. But they're right. It is loaded. Saying suboptimal and optimal is the exact same thing. You may as well say good or bad. It is the same fucking argument this is the exact same argument that I've literally had this exact same argument with fucking wild right-wing fucking nut jobs. Like right-wing conservative nut jobs. It's the same fucking shit. It's bootstrapping.
I did represent myself as a chud, pretty honestly.
I mean, that's fine. And again, keep in mind, like, again, I'm sure you know this because you come from Destiny's community. I'm a debate bro. It's just how it goes. I'm a debate bitch. So I don't hate you or anything like that, Dan. So just keep that in mind. But I do debate ferociously, and I am gonna say, like, I find it funny that you're willing to grant as much credence as you do for the frustrations of people who have all of their basic needs taken care of.
What do you believe property is? What do you believe it is?
Property? Like, I mean, I don't know what you mean by that. That seems like a fucking crazy broad question. Like, I mean, I've had
No, because the last time you made that statement, you said you will grant individuals that have suffered crimes to their property, but not to the people themselves. And I'm asking you, what is property? And I'm done. I want to
like,
clarify,
I mean,
but
it's a social property is a social construct by which we determine who can use and have access to what. That's property.
would you maybe grant that property is a representation of time, effort, and energy needed to gain a thing?
No, not at all. Not even close. Are you kidding me?
Why would you not say that?
Wait. Like, let's talk about some people who like, I mean, let's use a great example. Tucker Carlson, for example. Tucker Carlson is an heir to the Swanson family. Do you think that his wealth, that his property has anything to do with the effort that he put in his life? We live in a system where wealth is so tied to inheritance that, like, the greatest predictor of your fucking wealth is your zip code. Where you grew up is likely going to determine how well you do in life, because the chances are that if your parents had a nice house, you're going to inherit that house someday, or you're going to inherit the money of that house. And you don't have any idea. That gets, you start spreading that across generations. No, absolutely not. Property is absolutely not a representation of effort. You might be able to say, for some situations, you might be able to say, okay, well, yeah, if somebody works a job and they buy an Xbox, that's probably like they invested their time and effort into that, but absolutely not. As a general rule, that's an absurd statement to make. It just flies in the fact of objective reality.
But you grant that it exists for some things, like that Xbox example. Would you be willing to set an upper limit where that no longer applies? For your Joe average, works, gets a paycheck, buys a thing. That thing represents his time, effort, and energy.
No, not really. Not necessarily. Because, I mean, all of that assumes that the calculations our society makes in determining pay and stuff like that are actually correct. Also, all of that would assume that we have the correct value on things. So, like, no, I don't think so. I don't think you can make that jump. And I wouldn't. And I don't think it's useful to do so. Especially when we're talking about a situation where there isn't any sort of parity at all. There's no fucking equality between fucking homeless people and people who can own a fucking yacht. We have just, like, ridiculous, historically high wealth and income inequality in the United States. So it's just,
but it's not those super rich people being victimized by the homeless.
Sometimes it
Bill
is.
Gates lives in Medina. Bezos lives in another. I think he lives in the Highlands.
Right, but I'm not. But what I'm doing is I'm not saying that it's like okay that rich people are victimized or anything like that. What I'm saying is that you can't just assign property as some sort of one-to-one value. Like, that is that's ideology talking. That's the sort of like default bias of saying, oh, well, our society says that, if you have something, it must have been because you worked for something. But that's not true at all. I've worked my ass off and I have fucking nothing. Are you kidding me?
I'm saying that your income inequality argument, while valid systemically, does not necessarily apply to the homeless individuals that are hurting other Seattleites, that are primarily the working class to middle class.
But it's not.
Seattle.
But it's not
It is
homeless.
not the ultra 0.001% of Seattle that are being harmed.
But you're doing a little. There's a little, and I don't. And pardon me if this sounds like I'm accusing you of like dishonesty. I'm not. I don't think you're being dishonest. But there is a bit of a rhetorical sleight of hand that's going on here. You notice that you're saying that individual homeless people. You're saying individual homeless people while you're talking about homeless people as a class, and you're saying individual homeless people are doing it to other people in these neighborhoods. But those are two collectives you're talking about. You can't make individualistic arguments about two collectives. These are two collectives, the individuals of which have incredibly complex stories, and we have to look at the phenomenon of them coming into contact with another, which as of right now, because there is a huge disparity, because one has homes and food and the other one does not, there is disparity there. You realize that, right? Like, what you're trying to do is you're trying to sell, and I don't know if you're doing this intentionally, but you're trying to sell an individualistic argument while still talking about two different collectives. But that's not fair to do. Those arguments don't apply.
Those collectives express agency and do act.
Oh, individuals absolutely can, but we're not talking about individuals. If we were talking about individuals, you would say, well, my brother had X homeless person do this. And I would say, okay, well, Have we looked into what's going on? Why did the homeless person do that? Were they being an asshole? Should we try to provide some restitution for your brother? That'd be a totally different conversation, but that's not what we're talking about. We aren't talking about individuals, but you are trying to sell an individual argument, a conversation, a conclusion that could become from a conversation about individualism, about two collectives coming into contact with one another. We are not, there's no rules. Like, do you see what I mean? You've projected the idea of like a homeless crack addict breaking a window, when in reality, this isn't representative of every single issue that every single person has. These are two collectives, two collective groups that we're talking about that have come into contact with one another. And there's all kinds of little incidences that are happening. And when we're analyzing groups, you have to use the logic that applies to groups. And when we're talking about groups, you by definition, have to pay attention to socioeconomic factors, because that's what creates those groups. That's what creates that.
If I was doing that unintentionally, I apologize. To answer Gay in chat, yes, I was a libertarian back in high school. I'm probably more closer to a civic nationalist now. Libertarianism is kind of a meme. I'm far, far, far to the right of most people in King County, but I fit in rather well in Eastern Washington, where, I have another property. But,
all right, there. You got your extra property. You don't even have, you got more than you need even.
It's a hunting cabin. It's a hunting cabin.
All right. Yeah. All right. Okay. Fucking, you're lucky I'm not a Maoist.
But to sum up my argument, Seattleites are expressing anger towards the homeless. Mm-hmm. Probably as a proxy, to systemic government failure with the 3 to 4 NGOs that I listed. You agreed with me on that point.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're 100% right about that. I agree with you. I think that
the other issue is that the local elected city prosecutor, Dan Satterberg, along with some judges that are also in elected positions, seem to treat the jail as a revolving door. It is not uncommon to see somebody get arrested and literally be released 4 hours later after committing a crime like battery, like theft. There is literally a case not more than 3 months ago where a guy raped a woman. Unfortunately, he was found not guilty and raped the same woman again the day he got out of jail. Yeah. Like, a woman was victimized twice by the same dude.
But that sounds terrible. But this has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
But stories like this are common in Seattle. Yeah, that is why Seattleites are not happy currently. Okay. And I empathize with their anger. I understand why they are upset.
Yeah. Okay, but at the same time, I would argue that the argument that you are making right now is nearly, if not genuinely, like, besides wording, identical to that of a Trump supporter from like rural West Virginia saying that the immigrants took his jobs. Because it's the same thing. Like, you've admitted here that it isn't actually the problem with the homeless people, that it's actually the way the government is run, the fact that we have a ineffective government, that we should be putting pressure on our government. We should be addressing the economic problems. You've admitted that multiple times. So I would say that turning your attention towards the homeless is exactly the same as a Trump supporter blaming his economic woes on these immigrants. Saying, oh, it's immigrants, blah, 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 why they have to come here.
If we were going to pivot towards immigration, I would use it as an example. Right.
Like, but no, I'm just saying that like, I assume that you don't.
There's an element of truth to that statement when that West Virginian makes that statement.
Well, there's an element of truth to a lot of things. Like, there is an element of truth, and I say this with big scare quotes, but there is an element of truth to certain aspects of the fucking JQ. That doesn't mean we give it credence. We have to analyze these things and look deeper. And that's what I'm challenging you to do right now, is to say, wait a second, why the fuck are you getting mad at the homeless people and not at the fucking government who believes that you have to go through all these stupid NGOs instead of having the courage to actually say, wait a minute, we need to take care of the needs of the people.
I would push back at you because Sawant was one of the big proponents of Share, Wheel, and Hala and these NGOs.
Well, okay, I mean, sure, that's a possible relative criticism, but also you have to keep in mind that that Kshama Sawant is one of an entire city council, an entire culture that we've built up around constantly privatizing everything. So while perhaps you might be right, perhaps Kshama Sawant as a politician which is why I don't put my faith in a whole lot of politicians, mind you. Keep in mind, Bernie, somebody who I liked a lot, would have had a lot of the exact same problems. There would have been solutions that he went for that were not even close to what I would consider a good solution. I'm considerably more left-wing than somebody like Bernie or even Kshama Sawant. I mean, I think Kshama Sawant's like a Trotskyist or something, like, I don't know, which is, a whole thing, a whole can of worms.
She's a Trot.
Yeah, she's a Trotskyist. But so it's like, again, I have much different prescriptions than Kshama Sawant. But again, if we're looking to solve these problems, when your takeaway is to be angry or to justify, just like we wouldn't justify the anger of a racist person to blaming, even if there's a nugget of truth somewhere in there, we wouldn't accept that it's okay for a racist person to be hateful towards random Mexican immigrants, or even Mexican immigrants as a whole. We shouldn't accept people being hateful towards homeless people. And like, also, just so, like, I know like this is not exactly directly attached to the point, but I think it's relevant nonetheless, that like America has a huge problem with hating people that are poor. Like, Americans fucking hate poor people. It's unbelievable. It drips off of every single one of our cultural institutions are all about shaming poor people for being poor. And like the way that Trump, especially in this era of Trump, the way that he's approached it has been to basically say, fuck you, you can go die. So I just can't get behind like any argument that's going to demonize people who have even less than those who are suffering in other circumstances. And I would say that instead of turning against other members of the 99%, that we should say, hey, wait a second. What the fuck are the roadblocks that are stopping us from getting these people's house? Why are we giving $1 billion to a private company so that they can pay 100 people to check boxes while saying that they're making impacts, when we could actually take that money, or even just take a little bit more money and build houses that actually would give us the returns? Like, we know public housing projects have huge success rates. It's just that we don't give them money because guess what? You can't turn a public housing thing into a corporation. You can't make it turn a profit. And our culture hates the idea of public services. We've been in Reaganomics for years.
Super NIMBY. Like, I'm one myself. Every public housing works has been shot down every time it's tried. The reason why probably is because they picked like Magnolia, Queen Anne, Ravenna, the other spots. Like, if you wanted to do public housing, it would probably have to be from like Safeco down to Georgetown. Like, that's probably where it would be, and it's where it makes the most sense to be. Or it would have to be the International District. The International District is the least built up part of Seattle. Like, all the other buildings tower around it, but then there's issues with doing it in the International District because it's traditionally an ethnic enclave. They fight against it too. Like, there's a lot of problems in Seattle as far as land acquisition for public works.
Yeah,
and the fact
also
that it's an island connected by 3 bridges. Like, if you were to build public housing in Washington, you wouldn't build it in Seattle.
Yeah,
like, you wouldn't build it in Seattle at all.
Okay,
like,
but then commit to building it somewhere else and giving people the transportation they need to get where they need to go. I can tell you that people aren't going to turn down no longer being homeless. I mean, maybe some people will. Maybe some people who just can't adjust to going back to different but I think that that's an incredible minority. Most people would be willing to take a bus as long as the state was actually willing to commit to that solution. But instead, what happens is we all get taxed. It gets funneled into countless NGOs and private companies that promise to do this and that, and they don't do those things. And this is because once again, I point to pure ideology. It's not more functional. We've seen other countries have much more success with more socialized structures. It's because we have ideology poisoning. We are obsessed.
So can you understand why the citizens of Seattle might start being a little reactionary Andes if the makeup of our city council that grants money to these NGOs is overwhelmingly progressive? But Sawant is the only trot, but Carrie Moon, like 4 out of 7 are super progressive.
Yeah, but progressive.
Super progressive.
But progressive.
Like
progressive is not.
Yeah.
But progressive is not what we're talking about here. Like, progressive is that's the Destiny thing. That's the omniliberal thing. There's tons of progressives. There are tons of progressives who are fucking horrible to homeless people. Do you know how many fucking progressive governors have gone in and built fucking anti-homeless architecture to prevent people from taking shelter in the few places that do exist? Yeah, progressive doesn't mean fucking shit. If you're like I think being progressive is great on a social level. Of course, I think that you should have progressive social policies. But if they have fucking austerity-based Reaganomics economics, they're just shooting themselves in the foot. And it will be nothing but empty neoliberalism, the type of empty neoliberalism that lefties get fucking pissed about, because we get mad. Like a lot of people like who are lefties, like we get fucking pissed at the fact that it's like, oh yeah, we're going to make motions and say like, hey, we have the first gay rich mayor, but everybody else, you're still going to be homeless. We're not going to actually do anything to alleviate the problems. We're still going to look for these highly inefficient market solutions that work to the favor of corporations that are owned by people who are doing perfectly fine and are just looking for a way to fucking make more ventures. Like this is a huge problem. And what I would say is that while I can understand their frustration in the exact same way, I can understand the frustration of like this proverbial like Trump supporter who fucking hates Muslims and loves it when Trump or Mexicans and loves it when Trump rags on the Mexicans. I can understand that same perspective, and I will push against it and argue against it, as I have with you, which you expressed that mentality, and now I'm pushing against it, saying, why the fuck would you blame the homeless people? Yeah, I get why you're angry, but that's so ridiculous to turn it against the other people. You could be homeless in a few years. You know how fucking bad our economy is looking?
Oh, I could be homeless in 2 months.
Yeah.
That's absolutely.
Do you know how many Americans are in a precarious situation right now? I mean, I don't know if you saw that. I mean, I'm sure this, I think you said this for the first time to my channel, but I show a little chart all the time that was published by MSNBC of how many people are currently at risk of eviction across the United States, with some states over 50% of their renting population are at risk of eviction. That is ridiculous. And that is more than an act of God. That is like...
Our greatest divide is probably that I trend towards agency-based solutions, and you trend towards systems-based solutions.
Well, people say that a lot.
In your framework, what space do you grant for agency?
Wait, what space do I grant for agency? I grant space to agency in discussions of agency. That's what I talk about. We're not talking about individuals here. If you were to come to me as like a friend and say, oh, hey, my brother, in fact, fuck, I can even use a real life example, because my one of my partners lives in the fucking international district, and they had all this trouble with this guy who was dealing with drugs and stuff. And I gave advice that was based on that individual circumstance. I said, hey, like, this person is putting you in danger. It sounds like they're in a dangerous situation. Is there any way you can reach out to your community organizer? And that's actually what ended up happening. The community organizer did a wellness check, and I don't know what solution is going to come of it, because this happened relatively recently. But that's when I would talk about individual things. Here's the thing. What I don't like is that I don't like it when people take this sort of Thatcherite or Randian sort of hyper-individualism and then project it onto discussions about socioeconomics. I think it's possible to both at the same time be able to analyze a society and go, okay, yeah, there are a lot of homeless people, and and as a class, it sure seems like they don't seem to be able to find the solutions that they need. And instead of assuming that every single one of them is just a bad agent making suboptimal decisions, I go, that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense to make that assumption. Why would you project that sort of individuality? So I would keep room for agency in conversations with agents, but we're not talking about agents. We're talking about collectives of agents, which is a very different thing. Being a part of a collective and talking about an issue with a collective is very different than me talking to my friend or me talking to somebody directly and saying, hey, you probably shouldn't do that. They're very different conversations. And something that I've noticed, and again, this is not to like equivocate, but I've noticed Destiny does this too, that Destiny will try to project agency onto collectives. And it is a little bit of a rhetorical sleight of hand. And I understand why people come to that decision, because it is a huge part of our culture here in America. Again, a lot of it stems from that like Reagan era. There was no such thing as society. There was only individuals and families, like, which is ideology. That's not definitively not true, I would argue. I would argue that's objectively not true, but it's an ideological presupposition. So you making that a supposition is you then choosing to project how you would advise an individual that you actually know the circumstances of, to how you would try to deal with a group of wildly different individuals, all of whom have unfathomably complex personal lives. And when we're dealing with a group like that, you have to deal with collective solutions. That's the only way to look at collectives. It doesn't make sense to do so otherwise. Right?
I could probably try to work on that.
Yeah. I think it's worth something. I think it can be something that...
I don't know. As far as my philosophical framework, I I generally trend towards Kant's moral duty. Like you like, and this is where I become the feelings, not facts conservative. But like that one generally resonates with me the most. I think maybe Heidegger or Kierkegaard is the next one that I would probably go down. The framework of moral duty. That is generally like an agency based thing.
Yeah.
Now that agency might tell me that I need to work to improve the material conditions of our lowest Seattleites, and that's true. And I could say that I have a moral duty to do that, but that doesn't absolve other actors of acting the same way.
Well, yeah,
You know
it
what I
doesn't.
mean?
It doesn't
And I
absolve
think-
individual actors, but we're not talking like, I don't know. I don't think that we generally like, I don't know, or do you generally like look at the morality of groups? Like, because to me, when I look at a group, I say, okay, we have to take into like, I mean, I guess, and this is where sociology comes in, right? Because sociology is the study of like how groups and what emergent characteristics come out of a group. You can't really determine the morality of a group when there's so much variation within the group. But there are certainly some factors that can be identified that lead to the group being the way that it is. You can acknowledge that.
To answer Marinara, I don't know. I just like it. Maybe I read the story of Hercules meeting vice and virtue too many times. To answer Pinkwug, these are moral frameworks. They don't apply to policies. You're right. But me as a voter, when I vote to enact policy, I'm referencing my moral framework to what I think might be the best. You know what I mean?
Keep in mind that like, but keep in mind too, though, like here's something that I find is, and I don't know, maybe, okay. So philosophy, and this is going to sound like a really dumb take, but philosophy has an individualistic bias, at least in colloquial discussions of philosophy. Because when we're talking about philosophy, we're usually like thinking in our minds like, okay, so what is the right moral decision for myself to make in this decision? And now like you're like, or in this particular circumstance, not decision, sorry, I doubled up my words there. Saying like, okay, so in this circumstance, what is my philosophy? What is my approach that I'm going to take to this moral conundrum that I have in my life, which is inherently like a sort of individualistic thing, right? But when you're talking about policy, when you're talking about social policy especially, you're no longer looking at individuals. So I would say that when you are considering how you want to vote, you shouldn't project your individual moral circumstance onto other people that you know nothing about, because you can't accurately make that connection. You can't accurately make the same moral calculus that you use with whatever moral framework you operate under for somebody that you don't know. So what I would say is that adopting a sociological view when you're trying to decide how you want to vote is a way more, not only, it'll be like, in my opinion, probably a freeing way to engage with voting, or in the way to engage with politics. Because when we're talking about politics, we're inherently talking about collectives of people. That's what politics is. Politics is this emergent tug of back and forth of people living in groups. So these sort of individualistic moral decisions don't necessarily apply when you're talking about how you determine a group and how you maximize the outcomes for a group.
I don't want to be petty, but essentially you're making an argument towards rule utilitarianism in that framework, which is a different form of philosophy.
I mean, that's fine. I mean, yes, again, like I said, it's not like trying to find the way to word it is just like, I don't know. It's like Christian. I used to be a really, really devout Christian. I'm not anymore. I grew up in a really, really extreme sect. And one thing that's really interesting that I find is that there are some types of Christians whose politics are completely like their political outlook and their political involvement is completely and utterly tied to the Bible, despite the fact that the Bible, by and large, is mostly useful as a tool for building your own personal relationship with God, not as any sort of handbook for sociological interaction. It does perhaps, I mean, I wouldn't say it does a great job, but it perhaps does a job, fulfills an individual spiritual need to find your own sense of purpose. But it doesn't necessarily tell you what the best way to construct a society is, especially in a highly complicated society. And and I feel the same way about certain conversations that are held around philosophy, where some people look to sort of take these moral conclusions that they've come on how they make decisions and try to apply that to a unfathomably complex and diverse group, when in reality there are other forms of analysis that are more useful for that. For example, I would say sociology does a pretty reasonable job and has grown as a field of understanding how group behavior works, which changes the calculus when you're trying to decide, well, I'm not just deciding for myself, I'm deciding on what type of society I think that people should be able to live in. And in fact, maybe here's another way to look at it. If agency is really important to you, I would say that you should support political outcomes that enhance everyone's agency, because that makes making moral determinations that much easier, right? But
that's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
So I would say that like the state of things is and again, this is where I'm making sort of the personal argument, because I have to actually wrap up my stream here pretty soon.
So do I. I've got to go to bed here soon.
Yeah, fantastic conversation. And I really appreciate you being willing to come on here and deal with my spice, because I know it could be pretty spicy. It was a wonderful conversation.
It's all good.
But here's some food for thought I would say might be helpful for you, which is that our society is at like, oh God, the agency levels in our society are disgustingly low right now. Most people's lives are fucking calculated like to a great degree on the day that they're born. And with a handful of other life decisions that might change the course of their life. And it sucks to acknowledge that, but it's just a fact. Most people die in the same fucking income bracket that they were born into. Most people live and die in the same fucking, well, not less these days because people are moving all over this, but they live more or less the same way their family was living when they were born, with a few exceptions. With that in mind, there's not a whole lot of agency that our society affords us. And I would argue that a society that provides for all of the needs of people as a baseline is a society that will allow agency, individual agency, to flourish at the greatest degree. If people are not the subject of random acts of God and random acts of economic devastation, if we have a society that's built to put people first, those people will then be able to make we will be able to maximize for people's ability to make fully free decisions. But we can't do that when we have some people who don't even have food and water, and we have other people who live in excess. And we could fix that. So that's what I would put in your mind to think about.
Let me respond to Marinere real quick.
Sure.
She says, or he or she or they say, well, what do you do by doing so is implying that everyone else should have come into contact with the same level of information experience yourself. You're making yourself the bar for the minimum. You could look at that as egoism, or you could look at it as I just say, I'm just a guy. Like if and again, maybe a little bit of survivorship bias, like I'm nothing special. Like I'm able to make decisions. I believe others are smarter than me and can make decisions. And then they asks, are you primarily interested in addressing social issues or meting out moral blame? And I say both. You have a moral duty to improve social conditions, but you also need to discriminate and set a standard against bad actors. It is okay to punish bad behavior. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean,
I'm not advocating for hand chopping off, but you can have a little pain for those that decide to act against the commons.
Yeah, I mean, I think that gets into another pretty major conversation, which we can't really dive into right now. But largely, I would agree that having some disincentivizations is fine. Although, again, this is another whole conversation, but it does seem to be that positive incentives are actually significantly more motivating to the human psyche than negative incentives. And people usually only engage in this really negative activity because of extenuating circumstances. And unfortunately, as it turns out, a lot of people live in really, really, really extenuating circumstances these days. But again, I think this has been a really good conversation. I think we made some ground here, and I certainly was very happy to talk with you. I am going to just sort of send off my stream. Do you have anything you want to shout out? I don't know if you are a streamer or what, or...
No, I'm not a streamer. I don't do anything. Politics is a hobby of mine. I am an enjoyed debate bro. I'm not intellectually siloed. I listen to everyone from Alex Jones to Chapo Trap House. Intellectual siloing is lame. I respect Destiny for his rhetoric, and that is probably where I picked up optimal and suboptimal. I like to hunt deer. I don't do anything. If you guys have any Twitch or Twitch Primes, you should sub to Demon Mama Live. She's been a fair and honest interlocutor.
Well,
even though we are axiomatically opposed on both Seattle politics or Washington politics. I don't hate her. I don't believe that she hates me.
no, I don't. I
Um,
don't, for the record.
um,
Again, I've made my disagreements with you clear, but honestly, thank you for coming on. And again, not to steal from the book of the great rival of destiny, but as Vosh always says, it takes a lot to come up and argue in front of a fucking hand, like in this case 50 people, which is so hey, props for that, and thanks for coming on, and I hope that you'll hang around and we'll see you again. Maybe we'll have other
Absolutely.
conversations.
I'll argue about anything. I hope you have a very good night and sleep well.
Sick, absolutely, and have a wonderful night. Thank you so much. Bye. Hey, that was a good conversation. See? That was a good conversation. Sometimes you can reach, what's the right word? Synthesis? Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Progress is made. We both learn. I've learned a little more about this, about how to debate. With this one, I've certainly fucking learned a lot more about, I mean, very clearly, Peacecraft is incredibly knowledgeable on local Seattle politics, and that's based as fuck. And it looks like everyone here, we've been hovering at around 50 viewers. Damn! Looks like people like this kind of stuff, as it turns out. Wow. So, yeah, oh, Ace Man, you gotta see the VOD. Ooh, it was good. Ace Man, it was good. It was good. You gotta catch it. I will be editing this all up probably this coming week. I will probably be streaming later on in the week. I don't know the exact date yet because I don't have any plans, because I basically front-loaded everything into preparing for this debate. But I assure you, I will be streaming again very soon. Thank you. You want your YouTube money cut. You don't want the YouTube money cut. If anything, you should be begging for the Twitch money cut. The YouTube is, I have like nothing on YouTube. All of you who are here now, go fucking follow my YouTube. Go follow my YouTube. I think it's right here. Yeah, follow my YouTube. Go follow my YouTube. Nobody follows my YouTube. Oh, I owe you a dab. Dab. I will definitely dab for this stream. This was a great stream. Also, Rakasan, thank you so much for the resources that you gave me in chat. Deeply appreciate that. Seriously, thank you so much. That was really helpful for me to be able to draw on. And I will be putting those in my documents for later. So thank you very much. Thank you for the Hunter Cruz. Oh my God. Don't make me fucking cry. Oh my God. Thank you very much for the follow. Where did that follow notification go? If I follow the Truth Cat, I follow the Truth Cat. Don't you worry. Well, Ace Man, watch the VOD here because it will be up. It's up the second I end stream. Well, not the second. It's like 20 minutes after I end stream. It'll be up and you can watch it. It might even be instant, depending on how fast Twitch processes it. So watch the Twitch VOD. And then the YouTube one will come in the future. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Marinara, there'll be more of it in the future. I am definitively pushing myself to be better and braver in... Wait, what? No. Gayfesh, that was... Wait. Peacecraft, that was Rob. Rob Noor, not you. Rob Noor, not you. Not you, don't worry. It was Rob Noor. That would have been a totally different conversation, I promise. Yeah, we'll there's going to be more debate on this channel, all kinds of stuff coming up. It's going to be good. I'm pushing for this kind of content, so you can expect more. I love you all. You all have been so wonderfully supportive. Let's figure out who we are going to raid real quick. You want me to debate you? Not now. Not tonight. No, you debate bros. Get out of here. Debate me. You debate bros. Shoo. No more debates tonight. I'm exhausted. Hunter Cruz, much love to you. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you for all your support because I love having all of you here. Today has been totally amazing. And we're going to have more amazing streams to come, especially once I get all of my settings fixed. Let's figure out who we're going to raid. Ooh, A4 Andre. We could raid A4 Andre. Let's see. Oh. Let's see. Yeah, let's do A for Andre. A for Andre is based. Everyone, give love from the Demon Mama community to A for Andre. I love you all very much. I hope to see you all again very soon. I hope you enjoyed today. Thank you all for your support. Mwah! And I will see you very soon. Bye. Good night, everyone.